The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning to you. It's 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Alex Fisher.
And a man accused of stabbing his grandmother to death has been arrested. About 2 weeks ago, prosecutors say Juan Valdez stabbed his grandmother at their home on Flower Street. She later died. Valdez was arrested during the incident, but was charged with murder this week. His arraignment yesterday was postponed.
Overnight of a serious crash in East Bakersfield. This happened on Union Avenue near 8th Street. The crash happened shortly before 11 p.m. You can see the front of that SUV just completely mangled. No word yet on the condition of the driver or any potential passengers. And we're still waiting to hear back from police on what caused this crash.
17 News is your local election headquarters, and State Senator Melissa Hurtado is gearing up for another run for office. But this time, she has her sights set on Congress. That is according to a new report in the SJV Sun. Hurtado is expected to challenge the seat currently held by Hanford Congressman David Valadao. Hurtado narrowly won her state Senate seat, fending off her opponent by a margin of just 13 votes. We reached out to Hurtado's team for comment on the potential run. A spokesperson says Hurtado has no comment at this time.
As artificial intelligence companies promise to protect us from the possible dangers of the technology, users could soon see some changes to their experience. Washington correspondent Jesse Turner explains.
Artificial intelligence is quickly infiltrating everyday life, from healthcare to education. And the U.S. companies leading the way want to make sure their products are safe and secure.
We need to be both bold and responsible because that's essential to build trust.
Kent Walker is the president of global affairs for Google, one of 7 tech companies that signed on to new voluntary commitments with the White House.
To not just look at the technology as it is today, but try and anticipate some of the opportunities and risks of tomorrow.
Nick Clegg, the president of global affairs at Meta, says the companies agreed to publicly report flaws and risks in their technology, protect it from cyber threats, and label AI-generated content.
We're not waiting for regulation to make sure we get AI right.
But Common Sense Media CEO Jim Steyer stresses Congress ultimately has to act to hold the companies accountable for their products.
AI will actually replace certain forms of work. We have to have proactive policies to think about that.
Walker and Clegg say their companies support regulation from Congress. But while lawmakers continue to debate what that looks like, the Biden administration is taking these new commitments to the international stage.
We want to make sure that AI maximizes its potential for the extraordinary good that it can do around the world.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. will work to secure the same commitments from other countries in the months to come. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
As California continues to face the deadly fentanyl epidemic, a bill seeking to create a state task force to address the crisis is one step closer to becoming law. Capitol correspondent Eitan Wallace spoke with the bill's author about the need for action.
Yeah, the senator who authored this bill says time is ticking. He's concerned the fentanyl crisis will claim even more lives if the legislature does not act.
The delay in doing something about this crisis is no longer acceptable.
GOP Senator Kelly Siarto not mincing words on California's fentanyl crisis, a crisis blamed for the deaths of roughly 110 Californians every single week.
An epidemic of these proportions deserves a response.
That was Siarto earlier this month as he presented his bill, SB 19, before the Assembly Public Safety Committee. His legislation calls for the creation of a fentanyl task force of experts who respond to the crisis on a daily basis, including those in the fields of law enforcement, healthcare, legal services, and drug treatment. The idea is for the task force to meet and ultimately present lawmakers with data and recommendations about how to respond.
They know what's going on out there, and they can relate to us what's effective and what's not. And at the end of the day, with all of these type of people together, we can hopefully develop a strategy.
It's a message with which Democrats and Republicans agree. The legislation already passed in the Senate 40-0 and most recently got through the Assembly Public Safety Committee with unanimous approval.
Proud to support.
Democratic Assembly member Jasmeet Bains, herself a medical doctor from Kern County, wrote a similar bill on the Assembly side.
We need expertise to tell us what we need to do today, and we do not have the liberty of delaying this.
So what happens if the nearly identical bills from Bains and Ciarto both make it through the legislative process? Well, I'm told negotiations could take place to combine the two pieces of legislation into one overarching bill, all to create that fentanyl task force. Reporting from the state capitol, Leighton Wallace, 17 News.
Turning back to your court watch, and a driver was sentenced to probation for a deadly crash that investigators say she didn't cause. 30-year-old Kimberly Fomasuk pleaded no contest in the drunk driving case. Police determined she did not cause the crash, last year's crash that killed 19-year-old Jermari Terrell. Instead, investigators say Terrell's excessive speed was the primary cause of this crash. They say he was speeding at about 85 miles per hour on White Lane and could not stop before hitting her turning car. Terrell died at that crash scene. The prosecutors say Fomasuk was not entirely innocent because her blood alcohol content was more than twice the legal limit, and she also had cocaine in her system.
Nearly a dozen buildings in Oildale were threatened by a fast-moving fire. The two-alarm blaze happened yesterday afternoon on Harris Drive. Crews say high winds quickly pushed those flames. One home was on fire while other buildings, fences, and personal belongings were burning and threatening other homes. Fire crews attacked the flames from different directions, and it took them about 20 minutes to knock down that fire. But extreme heat forced firefighters to rotate as they continued to mop up the smoldering trees.
The firefighter safety is an absolute priority, and when we have these sort of triple-digit temps that we're experiencing right now in Bakersfield and throughout the county, we have to make sure that these firefighters are taken care of physically, that they're having the opportunity to get in the shade, to rehydrate, to cool down, because we're going to be at this for at least 48 hours.
No one was hurt. The cause is under investigation. Making news around the nation, the latest border battle has ramped up into a legal fight. The Justice Department is suing the state of Texas over a floating barrier the Republican governor installed to deter migrants from crossing illegally. NBC's Bree Jackson has the latest from Washington.
The Justice Department suing Texas over this floating barrier at the U.S.-Mexico border, asking a federal judge to force the state to remove the buoys at its own expense after Republican Governor Greg Abbott refused to commit to doing so.
He continues to do this really cruel, unjust, inhumane ways of moving forward with a system that has been broken for decades.
Governor Abbott firing back at the Biden administration, writing, Texas will fully utilize its constitutional authority to deal with the crisis you have caused. Texas will see you in court, Mr. President.
The buoys are a deterrent, and I think it's a positive deterrent. But it's once again, it's a quarter of a mile out of over 1,000 miles of border. So it's really the shiny object in this.
Republicans insist the White House is not doing enough to protect the border, even though crossings are down.
It's just about politics and somebody trying to appeal to a very narrow sliver of his right-wing base.
Despite the dangers of making the trek, some are still taking their chances.
But we are going to try to cross because honestly in Venezuela, we can't find a safe future and we want something for our family, something good.
As the legal fight ramps up, the fate of the buoys hang in the balance. And the Justice Department's lawsuit also alleges that Governor Greg Abbott failed to obtain a proper permit before installing the buoys into the Rio Grande, something that's required by federal law. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.